And we are live. Back to the Simplexity podcast.
Welcome back.
Yes. So we always kind of brainstorm before we start our podcast. And today I think we're going to talk a little bit about motivation, what it is, maybe strategies to improve self-motivation, possibly. I don't know. So you've been reading a book about motivation recently?
Several, yeah. And there are different theories of motivation, and like one is self-motivation, which most people call self-discipline. And then there's like institutional, collective motivation, which is part of a culture, and what drives a culture. And so yeah, we could kind of explore those topics
that cover like work ethic and stuff like that.
Yeah, company culture, values, mission, stuff like that.
Yeah, that stuff can get so cheesy sometimes too. Like Office Space.
Yeah.
It's almost like this fake motivation. I felt like also when I was in like Rancho at school, high school, if all this like pushing for school spirit motivation just seems so fake or something. And there's a difference between like this institutionalized, commercialized motivation and like what really actually gets you up and going. So anyways, just a little side anecdote.
Yeah, and I think part of that is like people trying to copy or emulate something. So I didn't know this till recently. I found out that the whole like signing the yearbook thing.
Oh yeah,
that used to be like an elite prep school thing that they did in like the East Coast. So that like these wealthy schools used to do this, and then people decided, hey, let's just do this across all public high schools everywhere.
It's fun.
It is kind of fun, but also loses its specialness at that point.
True.
And I think there's a lot of that high school spirit too. It's like, hey, we have a high school and we have spirit. It's like, why? Because we said so.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And then the flip side of that is like, I can imagine if you were working for Steve Jobs when Apple was just starting and everyone's just like enthused about the project and we're going to change the world and there's a mission. This is important. And then if you get hired by Apple today, like they say the same words, but it doesn't exactly have like the same energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's important to actually believe in the school or institution. And most high school kids are just like, why am I here? I'm in a pink prison.
Exactly.
Like I don't have school spirit. Like what is it? Like some kind of pride and ownership that needs to be there. And I don't know.
There's also this paradox of like, do everything you're told and be proud that you're here. It's like, maybe if I chose to be here and like put effort into being here, then I would like be proud of my achievement.
For sure. And then there's like all sorts of different kinds of psychological, or we talked earlier today, like behavioral Skinner type things to just like push the buttons and make them behave in a certain way.
Right.
Rather than instilling a sense of internal drive or motivation, which is much, much more powerful and long-lasting.
Yeah, so the distinction that I've seen most social psychologists make is the intrinsic motivation, which is like personal and internal, versus extrinsic motivation, which is like outside pressure.
Yeah.
And this book I was reading, Drive, it was saying that there are 3 levels of motivation. And so the first level is just basic biological drives, whether it's hunger, thirst, sex, just aggression, just very primal, basic drives. And those are all about survival. Makes sense. This is what cavemen did to survive. And so those are still part of us. And then motivation 2.0 is the Skinner stuff, right? Reward and punish. If you reward the good, punish the bad, and you can shape human behavior. And then he has what's called motivation 3.0, which is the idea that people need meaning and purpose to give them drive. And he starts the book out with this story about this like hook and pin puzzle. And this scientist like gave this puzzle to monkeys, and they were just like, playing around with the puzzle.
Is that like when the 2 horseshoes are stuck together and you have to
kind of like that. It's more like there's a latch and there's a pin blocking the latch, so you have to like pull out the pin and then pull the
like
latch.
A simple
like 2 or 3 step puzzle.
Got it.
And so he these monkeys were just like wanting to solve this puzzle.
Yeah.
And from like a Skinnerian survival.
Were there reward was like a banana inside or something?
No.
They just wanted to figure it out.
They were intrinsically motivated to figure this puzzle out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started doing other experiments where they had like one group was given a reward for doing it, and another group was not given a reward. And they found out that the group that was rewarded, when the reward was not there, their motivation dropped.
Okay.
And when the group that didn't have any motivation at all was just driven by the same level of
makes sense
curiosity drive.
Yeah, because now it's just like an addiction for some reward.
Right. So his point was that sometimes this Skinnerian scheming can backfire.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I guess it depends, like the whole Skinnerian thing. So I studied that quite a bit when I was in college. And what they're called schedules of reinforcement can actually have a huge impact. So if you consistently give a reward for every time they try, and then you stop, the extinction of that behavior, as they say, just goes off a cliff. Mm-hmm. But if it's less certain, you can actually increase the reward based on the availability or not. It's these uncertainty.
You mean the drive?
A
random reward will make them
the extinction of their behavior when they learn, the reward isn't coming anymore.
Uh-huh.
They'll continue to keep doing it even though they're not receiving the reward.
Yeah.
And it's more resistant to that,
mm-hmm.
depending on how you reward. How you reward the behavior. Mm-hmm. Like the slot machine analogy is the classic one. Just because sometimes you win out big, sometimes you win small. It's uncertain, and time and how many times you do it. If it just stops giving you any rewards, you'll still. That it's hard to like get the monkey, the bigger monkey or smarter monkey to stop pulling the slot machine.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. So there are some of these backfiring things that are, one, if you just rely on reward, then you probably come up with a bigger scheme of how the world works in terms of, well, why do anything if I'm not getting something for it, like a cookie or $1? Like, why not just, what's the point of even getting out of bed if I'm not going to be rewarded with some kind of marshmallow treat or whatever? Which basically destroys that exact thing you were talking about, that internal drive.
Yeah, and another example he gave, which is really interesting, they did this experiment where people were giving blood, and they separated people, and like one group, they paid them for giving blood. Another group, they just, donated their blood. Another group, they were able to they offered them money and said you could donate it to a charity. And it turns out the people who either didn't know about the reward or able to donate it to charity were more motivated to give blood than the people who were paid for it.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea that the underlying motivation for people giving blood is some sort of altruism. And if you pay them, like, you undermine their altruism.
You cheapen their heroic effort or something like this. Well, it makes a lot of sense. I bet you, though, if I had to make a hypothesis, that maybe if you offer a cash reward one time, it'll like boost blood donations for that month or whatever. That was your strategy. But then if you continue to do that, it'll probably drop off and then not be good for the long run. But maybe if you rely on these like internal drives, probably more effective. I guess what I'm saying is that you can use the Skinnerian reward, spike the dopamine hard strategy for a short time to get a big reward. But the sustainability probably suffers.
And then another example he gave was, there's Microsoft wanted to publish this encyclopedia called Encarta. I don't know if you remember this. And they just put tons of money into this. They had like the best people, the best programmer, and like all these resources went into this. And if you asked any sane, economist, social scientist, what encyclopedia would win, that would have been the one.
Yeah.
But the one that took off was Wikipedia, which is all open source and just people voluntarily contributing.
Yeah, and it totally decimates. Encarta, when it came out, was pretty amazing because there was nothing like it, and the internet was like barely a thing. But yeah, you're right. Wikipedia is mind-blowing, and it's all crowdsourced.
Right.
And it's what the heck. But Jimmy Wales keeps demanding I donate every year, which is a little annoying. When they first started up, I actually was donating because I thought it was so great.
Yeah.
And then after you start donating, they just never stop hounding you.
Yeah. That definitely demotivated me.
Yeah. Cut that out. So yeah, speaking of motivation, yeah, if you constantly beg after you, again, maybe it felt like he undermined, or Wikipedia had undermined my earlier generosity. Come back begging.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. And I know, like, I've donated to charities, and they send me just, like, papers and papers and papers. Give us more, give us more, give us more. It's like, right. You guys, like, I would probably be more inclined to give if you wouldn't hound me so much.
I agree. It's taken into a business advertising model rather than, like, what most charities I think should be is just, like, more altruistic and not how much can we market. Or this is the other thing that just drives me insane when you hear these, like, or watch these ads about, like, animal shelters and only $2 will save this puppy's life. And it's like a puppy with, like, a broken foot and he's, like, crying in the rain. Or, you know, it's and you're just, like, with this horrible, like, violin music going on. It's like, come on. Is this a way to motivate someone? I don't know.
I think the proper word is manipulate someone.
Well, yeah, talking about motivation. I get it. You know, stuff sucks and it should be nice to help. But, man, don't make some, like, Academy Award winning, like, drama about how pathetic these puppies are, you know. Yeah. Go ahead.
So he came up with these 3 prongs of what he called motivation 3.0. So motivation 3.0 is, you know, the modern age. What drives people in the modern age to, or, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs of, like, self-actualization. What gets people to that pinnacle?
Right. So after you've already fixed up all the basic drives and that what was the second one?
The Skinnerian.
Yeah, okay. Just like the operant conditioning kind of thing. Then it's
carrot stick, punishment, reward.
Yeah. The last one maybe also we talked a little bit about. It has more to do with, like, meaning and purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah.
And having that drive.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the 3 things, the first one is autonomy. So you want to give people as much free choice about what they do. And personally, I can tell you, for a long time, there's this idea of academic freedom. You have a lot of leeway in how you could teach your class and how you could set up your syllabus. Like, the more totalitarian the system gets and the more controlling the system gets and the more, like, the less freedom and autonomy I have, I get very demotivated.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just a glove that the hand of the government is moving through.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, someone doing something creative and meaningful that I think is going to serve students best.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's something to be said about making a choice, seeing the results, and being proud of it. But if it's this government hand pushing you like a sock puppet, then, like, what value is there in you? You're just a
cog in the machine.
Yeah.
So autonomy is the first one. And then trying to think what the second one was. The third one is purpose. Like, you want to do something with meaning, something that says, like, serves something greater than yourself. Like something, whether it be a cause or something you believe in, like some sort of mission that is personally meaningful to you. And they gave examples of, like, if you have a mission versus don't, and how if you have the mission, then that, like, gives you drive. And oh man, I'm forgetting the second one. Oh, mastery. So the second one is mastery. So it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And mastery is this idea that people like being good at things. Like, it gives them a sense of satisfaction to say, oh yeah, I nailed it and I got really good at that. And if you get out of people's way, they'll just deliberately try to improve things because they want to be better.
It may be valuable to others and specialize. And then, you know, the baker, the butcher, and the candlestick maker kind of thing.
Yeah. So if you think about the Wikipedia example, like, it's total autonomy. Nobody's monitoring you. Like, you can make this paragraph as pristine and as perfectionistic as you want,
Mm-hmm.
and then it serves a larger purpose. Like you're contributing to the Encyclopedia Galactica for all humanity. So it checks all three boxes for motivation 3.0.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. It'd be nice if that was so maybe we talk a lot about like economies and markets and money as a driver and what's driving. So this is one critique I would say with capital. Well, it's a critique and it's not. So one thing is like these capitalist economies do promote like entrepreneurship and they can move quickly. It's a perfect example of motivation. If you have if you give something of value that the market decides is valuable, then you're rewarded for it. But maybe that's more Skinnerian. Maybe that's the thing. Is
I don't
the
know.
capitalist thing's more Skinnerian rather than this like higher order fulfillment?
Maybe. I mean, if you're thinking about an entrepreneur, I think part of the reason people become an entrepreneur is because they want autonomy, right? They want to put in more work and have a proportional reward for their work, and it's something meaningful for them, right? They're not somebody's employee.
Very true. Yeah.
And I think another example he gives in the book is Google has this thing called 20% time. And the idea is the engineers and creative people are allowed to spend 20% of their time on a project of their choice. So they can just pursue like programming or games or just any project they want. 20% of their time, they can do that. And again, it checks all the boxes, right? It's autonomy, it's mastery, and it's meaningful to you. And they found that number one, it was an incubator for all sorts of cool ideas and programs. But on top of that, people became more productive with their other time too.
Interesting. Huh. So why? What is the explanation for them being more productive with their other time? Do you think? Just exploring here.
Yeah, I think it's because they feel free. Like they feel what they're doing is it's not just like, slaves rowing the boat. It's like they have a bit of personal autonomy and creativity, and which has them like buy into the greater mission more.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it also like stimulates their creativity in their other assigned projects too.
Yeah, it could be.
Like maybe you open some windows or doors in this project, and then you go back to your other one. You're like, wait a second, maybe we've been looking at this the wrong way. And then having that kind of problem solving or excitement of doing something new or different can transfer. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Because I mean, that's a nice way to think about it. The other way I was thinking about it is like, everyone gets 30 minutes out in the prison yard to walk around or something. And then you got to go back into your cells, right? Just to get a little bit of taste of the sunlight.
or like these generous corporations offer free coffee to their employees. Well, wow, it turns out productivity goes up 10% when people have coffee.
Right. Not to mention that caffeine's a stimulant too. It keeps you up and keeps you going. Yeah.
So, anyways, I found it resonated with me in a lot of different ways of what works and what doesn't work in my life, and his whole idea is if we can get this into businesses, if we can have like what we know scientifically to match what businesses are actually doing, like we could transform the workplace.
That makes sense. So this is all very positive kind of, be productive, do your own thing, be creative, and that'll increase. I do think, kind of not play devil's advocate, but there's two sides of the coin. And I think, a source of anxiety or fear or something that also is like, we got to hold the ship together. That kind of worry is also promotes motivation to keeping things going. It's like taking a shower every day or brushing your teeth or, doing these kinds of things. They're work's not really work, but you get used to it. Yeah. But then if you don't do it, you're just like, ugh, like kind of cringy. That like I don't know if it's anxiety or fear.
I think it's a habit. It's like this craving from a habit.
But I think you have like you want to avoid that negative feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and so you do it anyway to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to me that's not. It's been so put into a habit that when it's not done, it feels bad or wrong, or you've done something incorrect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is all. That's just all to say that maybe some of these other kinds of feelings, like anxiety and fear, are important motivating factors, even though most of the time they're seen in a negative framework.
It's like an inhibition, right? Fear typically freezes people, right? They'll be inhibited from doing something or held back because of their fear, rather than as a driver.
Or, I mean, the classic thing is like fight or flight, or freeze, I guess. But sometimes that fight motivation can stem from probably fear and anxiety. We've talked a lot about Goggins. Yeah. But Goggins' theory of motivations. He's probably, went through a lot of stuff and he's just like, yeah, getting angry and let's go. Again, considered like from a negative point of view, but maybe it can be effective in certain ways, harnessed.
Another interesting thing is the idea of demotivation or demoralization. I was reading about this thing called moral injury. And I forget what the ingredients of moral injury are, but essentially it's when someone is in a position of authority over you and they do something immoral or abusive and it like rocks your view of justice, then you get demoralized. And there was like a third element to it too. But yeah, that one rang true also. I think I've seen I've experienced, but I've also seen other people say, man, I had so much respect for this person. They did this, this, and this. And it's like their leader let them down. And now they're just like,
Yeah. At the same time, what's the line I heard recently again? Heavy weighs the crown,
The sword of Damocles.
But just saying, or the Spider-Man thing, great power comes great responsibility in terms of a leader is. I don't think leadership is as easy as people would think, and if someone lets them down, like a leader type, it's like, would you like to give it a try?
It wasn't so much letting down; it was more like abuse.
I see.
So it wasn't a lack of doing something; it was more like doing something inappropriate.
I see. Okay.
Like if you looked up to your boss and then they, sexually molest you and tell you to keep quiet, it's like there's this inversion of like, admiration to, I don't understand the world anymore.
Right. Okay. So it's not. I was more thinking. Okay, so maybe your boss or the leader made a decision, and then the outcome, it just didn't work. And with all best intents, it failed. And so it's now like you're blaming the leader that things didn't work out, and now your paycheck is a little lower. It's like, well, there's something to be said. But in terms of those abusive situations, for sure, I can see how that can totally and dramatically cause a moral injury, as you say. Yeah.
Almost like a shock or a PTSD where it's like, I don't trust my senses anymore. I don't trust my own ability to judge people anymore.
Yeah.
Disillusion too. Maybe that's another word.
Or maybe losing a sense of naivety, like figuring out that the world is not as clean and easy to understand, and no one talks about it enough, I feel like, and kind of sweep it under the rug and just pretend it's not happening and keep going.
What do you mean?
I mean, people aren't honest, as I think, about these things, and it's easier just to not talk about it. Like one thing when I was growing up as a kid, and this is not like a moral injury thing, but like, let's say like, what's your income? Or, how much did you buy your house for? These kind of economic questions. it's just, I guess it's impolite, uncomfortable, and no one discusses it. It's just you don't go there. And I never understood that because I felt like I was left so confused about money and what's an appropriate amount and how you can live. And I still feel it's that way, and not as much maybe, but I just wish people were more open about those things because then you can try to make the world less mysterious or like WTF when it actually confronts you in a real way.
Yeah. Well, and I'm very disappointed in the education systems. Number one, on money for sure. It's like it's so vital, and like nobody tells you how a stock works. Like that seems like something useful to know in life.
Yeah, yeah.
And like it's just so rudimentary. Like why wouldn't you teach people that? And that boggles my mind. And the other thing, I think we mentioned this before, like I had no idea. Well, I guess at some level I did, but I didn't think education, the higher education, was about research. I didn't know that.
Me neither until I got there. Yeah,
And it's like there's all this. It's about education. It's about education. It's about education. Like okay, so higher education is about education. But then you get there, you realize, oh, it's about research. I wish somebody would have told me that because then I could have been prepared and aiming properly in terms of what I'm doing and why.
Totally agree. Yeah. So there's a lot of that. I guess when we were talking about like being having your view of the world kind of change, and I think maybe that should happen earlier and more deliberately. And I think a lot of it is because of these weird cultural things, like the example I brought up. No one wants to talk about income or how much their house is worth or anything. I guess I can kind of understand that, but now I'm just like, get over yourself and just be honest and try to help people who are like learning how to navigate this world and what it means. And I don't know. That was something, just an example of mine that I had.
Yeah.
But we were talking about like motivation.
Yeah.
Right. And we were talking about moral injury. And
maybe I could look it up and give you the exact wording or exact definition.
Maybe we could do that.
I'll be the Jamie.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a pause then. We'll be right back.
We don't have to pause. We can record it.
Nah, it's going to be weird. All right. All right. We're back after a short recess of looking up Wikipedia. We definitely need to set up a more live lookup system here.
Jamie Station.
Jamie Station. Yeah. So basically, moral injury, at least to me, sounded like a psychological trauma. Something that, like post-traumatic stress disorder, they talked about rape victims and probably other domestic violence abuse survivors and all these kinds of things, to where maybe their perception of reality has just been shattered, kind of like what you were saying. Yeah. So in the context of motivation, what was the moral injury?
We were talking about demotivation and demoralization. And when you're demoralized, it's like you're demotivated, but like at a deeper level.
Yeah, and maybe a sense of being something being unfair about it as well.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
well, it's an interesting sort of play on words because there's this idea of morale, right, where you have like energy, pep, drive, right, and in like military terms, right, the morale of the troops, but it's also very closely related to moral. And when you're demoralized, there's a sort of moral loss there. Right. And that ties into the inversion of this purpose thing, right? So if purpose gives you a sense of meaning and motivation, then like meaninglessness could be demotivating.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's safe to say for sure. It just seems strange to me that most of people's responses that I've seen, especially in it's more modern culture, is to do more of this coddling approach, if someone has some kind of moral injury, to treat them with baby gloves. But I don't know if that's the best therapy.
Yeah. Well, and here's the challenge. It's like the people doing that get their moral purpose out of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like their story of, what makes their life meaningful. It's like let's say you work at a sexual harassment office,
Mm-hmm.
and you get sexual harassment claims, and you think, oh wow, I have something important to do today.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point you might start inventing claims so that you have more of your work to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's partly where this coddling comes in, is like people built their identity around being the coddler,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where they get their source of meaning. But it's a zero-sum game in the sense that like their source of meaning takes away somebody else's source of meaning.
By holding them less accountable for their actions.
Right. Or preventing or depriving them of an opportunity to learn and grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also maybe teaching them a strategy of blaming rather than being motivated to make a difference or do something proactive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a special balance between being sensitive to those kinds of pain and moral injury, but at some point it also kind of seems like belittling. Like if someone is just overly like, it's just like, oh, shut up, treating me like a baby or a child.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm capable, appreciate the concern, but just like, stop.
Yeah, when I absolutely love the stories of people who like rise above and like transform their lives despite all odds.
Mm-hmm.
And those stories are inspirational to me. And it seems like some people really like those kind of stories,
Mm-hmm.
but other people like enjoy like languishing in misery, and it gives them a sense of purpose. And well, one example is like the George Floyd thing. So a lot of conservative people said, well, he didn't really do anything remarkable. He wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. marching for a cause. He wasn't like, standing up for something.
Mm-hmm.
He was, and so that's a good point, I think, the conservatives have. And his only claim to fame was that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
And he became an emblem for a greater problem, and people kind of flock to that.
Yeah. Like a martyr situation.
But not exactly a martyr, right?
Because I guess martyr stands for something to begin with.
Yeah, right?
Not
like
becoming a symbol.
Right, like Martin Luther King Jr. was shot because he stood up, and same thing with Gandhi. Like he was shot because he stood up for India, and Lincoln
risked his life voluntarily, willingly for a greater cause.
Right, and it's almost like they knew it was going to happen, and that was part of the price that they paid for standing up for something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And so this was in reference to
the ethos of coddling. Like people they feel like their life has meaning when they can help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that fed into the George Floyd phenomenon.
I see. Right.
Like people had been like honing their gears along these grooves, and when that happened, the program just played out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of the framework of motivation we've been talking about, so maybe someone might be motivated to kind of coddle or protect someone who has been some injustice just upon them, and that's kind of their motivation to fight for the ones with less power,
underdogs or whatever. Yeah,
and that's fair. But then I guess the original idea was, maybe that's not motivating for those people who don't have the power.
Right.
Maybe giving them power,
right,
or at least encouraging them to seek it out and earn it, or something along those lines.
Yeah, well, and like the progressive position is like, look, there's social oppression. There are these systems that are unjust, and somebody's got to step up and say something. And Okay, yeah, there's some truth to that too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's another sort of, I don't know what vein of thought this comes from, but some black people say, leave me alone, white people. I don't need your help. We're going to do this on our own, and then we're going to be proud of what we achieved on our own. We don't need your handouts.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it's more of a conservative kind of.
Yeah, well, it doesn't necessarily just have to be about like race and inequality in that sense either. Just anyone who's in a
Oh yeah,
position
I know.
of
I
less
mean,
power.
right. I mean, you can change the topic to like, you know, gays and lesbians. Should you
Some historically oppressed
right or
group or class.
right whatever the class or of oppression is, like, do you empower them or do you give them a hand up? Like, what's the appropriate line?
Right. And it's not to say that giving a hand up is not bad. It's if that's all you do. That's all I'm saying. Is that you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. You got to have some from both ends. And that's also maybe kind of the point I was making with motivation, is that it's good to be encouraging and having that motivation for fulfillment, but also that kind of like low key anxiety and fear of not brushing your teeth or taking your shower, and just like that negative emotion can also be pushing in the correct direction. It's like a multi-pronged thing. It's not like this way is bad and this way is good. Well, if you have too much of this, it's bad. If you have too much of this, it's bad.
Push pull.
Yeah. And then there's some sweet spot right in the middle. Talk about motivation and performance. The inverted U curve for stress and performance.
I think so. Yeah.
So if you basically are not stressed or pushed at all whatsoever, your performance is on the low end of the bell curve, let's say.
Right.
And then if you are stressed a moderate amount, you're somewhere in the middle. You're at a peak, right? And then you're overstressed. You go back down to this complete shutdown, like cannot handle and compute. So a similar kind of thing is that you got to push them, you got to encourage, or yourself even, not just other people, as an individual. And you can't go too far, and you can't be too weak. That's all, I guess, the point I'm trying to drive across with most of these things we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think some place that's called flow state. Like Csikszentmihalyi has this thing called flow, and it's this exactly that. It's this optimal challenge. Like if it's too hard, you'll get anxiety. If it's too easy, you'll get bored. So you want to like get into the flow state where you're focused, you're on mastery, you're making progress. And I think it's called the Goldilocks zone, right? It's this perfectly balanced place.
Yeah, and it's gonna be different for different people too.
And this is all so a little small tangent. So this book was saying that game designers try to tap into this. So when they create their like levels in the game, they want you to be like in this flow state where you're having fun and it's a little bit of challenge and you're just like ramping up your skill level as you play.
Definitely, yeah. And if it's too easy, it's just like, okay, this is boring. If it's too hard, it's like, it's gonna take me a million years to get good at this. I'll just do something else or whatever. Yeah.
And I forget the developer, but this person like optimized their game for flow, and then they like were hired by Sony and like made millions of dollars off just applying this concept to games. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I bet like in Dota 2, one of the things we would do is we played ranked a lot. And so basically your flow state is calibrated based on your skill level. If you get better, your rank goes up, you're going to be matched with people with higher skill.
Yeah.
It kind of puts you in this zone where it's going to be tough. And like basically if you look back at your history, it's like 55% win, 45% loss, or it's like something around the border. It's not like 90% of the time I win.
Right.
Most of it is like it's like a 50-50, and it keeps it interesting. So I'm thinking most of these games, so I have a built-in calibration to like maybe adjust the difficulty or the stress. There was one game, I don't think it took off very well, but it was like one of these horror games that are like with jump scares, like walking through a haunted mansion or whatever. And it's either on the controller or some wearable device keeps track of like your heart rate. And so they can actually change how the game is behaving depending on like your sympathetic activation.
It's like, okay, he's about to have a panic attack.
Let's tone it down.
Let's chill out, yeah.
Or if the heart rate's increasing, then we'll just like have the music slow down or some sound off in the distance. Like, you can really tune into someone's physiology and start messing with them.
In a benevolent way.
Entertainment. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about motivation. I mean, that's a pretty wide open area of discussion as well. But I guess we've been mostly talking about motivation in terms of being productive, bettering yourself, kind of like a self-help thing.
I guess. Another concept we touched on in the beginning is the idea of grit or self-discipline. It's like, where does that come from? Because it seems like, you know, you've got to push yourself to do stuff you don't necessarily want to do, but your persistence pays off in the long run.
What's the payoff there? Like, put yourself through all that stuff, I wonder. It might be, so there was like 3 levels, right? I definitely don't think it's the primary one.
Autonomy?
No, like the food and sex.
Oh, right.
And then the second one was like this instrumental reward thing. I think it has more to do with purpose and meaning. Not sure how to connect those dots, but that would be my guess.
I read this other thing. This is the Diary of the CEO. He talks about, what do you call it? It's not ego strength. Self-story. He talks about having a positive self-story. Right? Well, he'll be interviewing people. Like, he was talking to this athlete guy, and he was saying, you know, this guy was just beating him up. And he kept telling himself, if I can handle this, I can handle anything. And, you know, once I handle this, I can handle anything. And he was creating a sort of identity, a personal story that was empowering. And so then after that, when he was fighting, he just had this like will of stone that he'd built.
Yeah. So I guess the reward or something is he's a much more sturdy person that can overcome a lot of hardships because he's been, I'd say, forged in the iron.
The fires of Mount Doom.
Yeah. Trying to find the right vocabulary.
So one source of grit could be this self story. Like, you view yourself as someone who's overcoming, and like that is your purpose. Like it's like a personal purpose that you have.
I also think it builds confidence in knowing that you can handle something that's difficult.
Like satisfaction.
Yeah, and just a lot of the motivation the motivation to take action is to be confident that what you're doing at least has a chance. Maybe that's not the 100% right thing, but that you're not being foolhardy or if you did, you know, you've been there, you've done that, you've been forged. Hopefully not in the Mount Doom or whatever, but yeah, I think it's important. And part of this coddling thing is like sometimes character needs to develop by facing hardships. Ideally voluntarily. I think we've talked about that too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because if it's involuntary, it triggers your fight or flight response. And then if you do it voluntarily, then it's the exploration circuit.
Yeah. Right. But that sense of grit, I think that it's been losing ground to the more compassionate side, I think, this coddling thing.
Our culture, I think, is neurotic in the sense that, like, you mentioned, what's his name? Goggins. He's like 100% grit, 120% grit.
He's a little overboard.
He is overboard.
A lot overboard. Yeah.
But he's also popular.
Yeah.
And another guy is Jocko Willink, right? His what is it?
It's like an ex-Navy SEAL who's like killed who knows how many people. these missions.
Yeah.
He's a hardcore guy.
Discipline is freedom.
Yeah.
And he's all the same thing, or Bedros Keuilian, right? So these guys seem to be gaining like cultural purchase, probably because there's a need. And there's this weird like shift in the culture or split in the culture where part of it's this like coddling, compassionate part, and then others is like this, very like manly, rugged.
It's really interesting. I guess it's just a lot of things is coming polarized and kind of like getting pushed to the edges. I don't know if it's just more interesting and entertaining for people, or maybe they've been lacking one side so much. Like if you lived up in like David Goggins, Jocko Willink thing the whole time, maybe a little bit of this compassion thing might sound nice, and you go pretty deep into that, or vice versa.
Right.
And might as well go to the extreme to what, the internet has to offer when it comes to both sides. Yeah. Moderation does not seem like a something that's hip in today's world.
Well, and how much of it is the market?
Yeah,
like
push it.
Give the market what it wants, or I don't know.
Push it to the limit. Yeah, I mean, give the market what it wants.
What I'm saying is the market just responding to what's there? Right. So I mean, like Jocko would be doing what he's doing regardless, but because there's a need in the market, he's blowing up.
I don't know. Well, a need. I mean, so we've talked before too about how a lot of these like social media things and echo chamber things that get popped up are pushing people to these extremes, and then now maybe those kinds of factors are fabricating the market demands to make like Jocko more intriguing because they've already been pushed that way into this polarized,
like a side effect of social media.
Yeah, or as part of the maybe whole system of this polarization, and then that becomes more popular, and then the algorithms happen, and then the echo chambers increase, and they kind of get pushed to the sides. So those kinds of characters are becoming a lot more popular.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. Very interesting. It's all connected.
It's hard for me to imagine like what it is like for kids growing up in this,
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine being 15 and just like in middle school or high school going through all this?
It seems pretty wild.
And like this is your developmental years where you're like figuring out who you are and how the world works.
Just so much information overload. Yeah, I was watching this talk the other day about Dunbar's number. And how, over evolutionary time, there seems to be an optimal number of people that you can collaborate and know, and everyone knows everyone else is like your tribe.
Yeah.
It's kind of what you're wired for.
Right.
Right. And you go beyond that, then maybe it's best to have another tribe. Now you have two tribes that can trade or go to war. But
and cognitively, you abstract the other because you can't fit it in your brain.
Yeah. So anyways, bringing that up and then just thinking about a child growing up now, it's just like, what? Like the brain was not meant to compute with this much information and visual data and all sorts of people saying all sorts of things.
Right. Or let's say you make an Instagram post and you get 1,000 likes. Like your brain literally cannot comprehend 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So what does 1,000 likes even mean?
Right. Maybe as an adult we can kind of abstract it in just like math terms, but if you're a kid trying to like understand what's going on, it's like, good luck. Yeah. I don't know, and how fast things are moving, it seems so crazy.
Yeah, and ideally in the sciences, like once you get your PhD, you're like at the cutting edge, and that your job at that point is just to like stay current with what's coming out. But at some point, it seems like the production level is like exceeding the individual's ability to keep up with it.
For sure, yeah. Technology is having a major impact on the way we operate, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with it, but we're kind of doing, what's the analogy? We're trying to fix the plane while it's flying 30,000 feet in the air, and then...
Right. Or build the ship during the voyage.
Right, or maybe make a rocket ship that to escape while we're on this plane. And it's like, no, this is like, it's almost impossible to keep up with everything. I don't know. Maybe we'll just leave it all to the AI overlords to figure it out. It's all part of the plan. Tell us what to do. Yeah, but anyways, with this discussion, so they're talking about like Dunbar's number, and basically the importance of the local community and interaction and the tribe, in all sorts of like existential, metaphysical reasons and purpose and meaning. And when now we're living in this like sterile like internet thing when you can talk to 1,000 people at the same time and from your living room, and that whole sense of local community and connection on this Dunbar thing is just like last week's garbage. And I think it's going to have some consequences that we aren't even can imagine what the impact could be.
Yeah, well, this culture code book, like the first thing it says that you need is trust. Mm-hmm. And the way you build trust is through a sense of belonging. Mm. And yeah, and that's just like deep in our social psychology. Mm-hmm. And he talks, I think we were talking about this in the humor one, where you can measure rapport just by looking at physiology. Like mm-hmm. people are laughing at the same things, they're at ease. Yeah. And that's how you can track belonging and trust. And all of that's just by interpersonal cues. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have that and you just have this like monitor and like mm-hmm. likes and dislikes and, angry 4chan trolls, like
I guess there's some weird organic thing where like their own little communities and tribes develop, but it's not the same, I don't think.
But I don't think it's genuine belonging.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe what friends mean now is different than what friends meant a while ago. It was like just a local support, mm-hmm. things like that. Friends now is like someone you can play a game with and then forget about.
Yeah. I know. I think C.S. Lewis said a friend is someone who walks the same secret road. Mm. And the way he described it is you go against the herd together. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like that makes sense. You think about like adolescents, yeah. right? They're rebellious, but they rebel together.
Yeah.
And or even like the kids in his Narnia stories, right? They leave the world, go to this alternative fantasy world mm-hmm. together. Yeah. And that like, or in Harry Potter, same thing. You have this like strong bond of friendship because you're apart from the main group.
For sure. And I think with this whole internet thing and this culture, everything is more disposable. I don't know, like mm-hmm. if you don't like someone, you can just delete them. Like right. literally.
Ghost them.
Or from your friends list. Or like, and I don't know. It seems crazy. And in dating too. Mm-hmm. Ghosting and just delete. Control Alt Delete. Oh, I don't really. It's not even that I don't like you or you've wronged me horribly. It's just like you're boring and annoying. Like delete. I don't know. There's something about that like disposable consumer shit mentality that's getting kind of weird.
I forget who said this, but I think it might have been Peterson. He was talking about how like in video games you have like chat moderators and like game moderators. Mm-hmm. So if somebody does something not cool, you boot them from the server. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or you boot them from the game. And so the idea is that people grow up with this as a standard. So then they're like, oh yeah, let's apply this to work. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't like you. Let's boot you. And as like the root of cancel culture. I think
those are appropriate for serious offenses and like completely whatever. But now it's just like for such minor things, I would think it gets kind of crazy. And it just seems, it's dehumanizing too.
For sure.
For the person getting booted, but also...
Well, and our whole justice system has things to account for this. Like you're supposed to be able to face your accuser mm-hmm. in a court of law, and like defend yourself. But this is just like mob justice, right. And it's rough.
Yeah, and online too, you can have aliases and being anonymous. I think there's been a lot of talk about that mm-hmm. as well, and people who are under an anonymous cloak and don't have to accept any kind of responsibility for their actions, they can be pretty nasty.
Pretty
like,
vile.
More vile than your average bear.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the long-term repercussions of all these things is still unclear. But I think it's not healthy, and it's generating some really strange dynamics. And it's evolving so rapidly. Who knows where it's going to go?
With the Sigma?
With the Sigma? With Sigma?
That's like, what is it? The young kids slang. Kids are getting slang off TikTok.
Yeah. So Sigma's a new thing, or you just made that up?
No, that's definitely a thing.
What is it?
I'm not sure.
Wow, okay. Sigma. Okay, I'm feeling old.
I know middle school teachers, and they fill me in on some of these phrases.
That's groovy, right?
Groovy, man. Wicked.
Yes. Cool. Well, I think that was a pretty good discussion. Do you have more points you'd like to add, or clarifications or anything?
No, I mean,
maybe the book plug. So this is called
Oh yeah, so I mentioned like 3 books. So one's called Drive.
Mm-hmm.
The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. Also mentioned Diary of CEO and Culture Code.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really interesting books.
Cool. All having to do with motivations
and culture.
Yeah, important things to keep us going. So, and there'll be links in the bio as normal.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Like and subscribe, comment, ask questions.
All of the above.
Criticize us. Tell us how horrible and wicked we are.
Use all the new slang too, so I can learn a little bit. All right. And as always,
always be curious.
Always be curious.